And now let's go to Jess Dozier, who owns Hangman Creek Dioramas, for a really super diorama that he's building for us. So Jess, welcome.
All right, good. So been out a couple of weeks because of work, but kind of went through the instructions last time, and then the next step was basically just to prime the resin pieces. Now the great thing when you prime resin or any material, I just use good old Krylon camouflage. It dries ultra flat. It goes on really lightly, so it won't obscure details. Again, for wood, I try to use the tan. If maybe if you want a darker tone, they have a gray and all sorts of colors, but lighter is good. You can always darken something, but you can't lighten something very easily, right? So you don't want to go that route. So
Jess, your voice is really low.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me a little better there?
No.
All right. Let me just crank up the volume here. See if that helps. All right. Is that any better at all?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. So basically prime this week, and then I'm going to go through one single piece though today that is really, it kind of gives you really cool results without a lot of effort. And it's generally something that isn't that easy to deal with to get great results. It gets overthought easily. But what we have is started life out as just this is the basic casting for the boat. Okay. Styrene master I built, and then mold, so it's resin. But what we want to get here is we want to show the wear and tear that happens on logboats. And if you really look at rust and you look at those years that things are in the water, they get a lot of texture, right? And they've been painted multiple times, and they just, they just look rough, right? And how do you replicate that, in kind of an easy way that gives that natural variation that nature does over years and years without overthinking it or spending a week painting a boat? Because I want to get the boat done so I can get to the rest of the diorama. I don't want to spend days and days messing with this thing. So prime it first, right? Let that rest. Again, priming is, clean the resin first. Prime it's critical. It's going to give it that tooth that it needs for paint to adhere. The next thing I'm going to do is, I'm a big fan of texture. Chalk will give you amazing texture, right? The chalks I use are, generally Bragdon or AIM, just the powder. They go a long, long ways. I've been using the same little canisters for a number of years. I've had to replace the black a couple times. But what I do is I just use a little Pyrex bowl. It can be cardboard, whatever. But what I'll do is I'm going to paint this boat with basically just a dark black, right? And while it's wet, I'm going to dump it into this mixture. And then I'm going to spoon the rust over it. I'm going to lightly brush it. And I'm just going to let it be random and let it be a little messy. And the results come out shockingly good every single time. And, you don't have to be, Picasso, an artist, or, and you get really, really good results. It's also wonderful for things like rusty pipe, scrap metal, and it's also quick. So basically what happens when you paint it, it's painted, it's very, very fast. And then the act of it being wet and then being dropped into the chalk, and the chalk has starches in it, they basically will bond, and it will instantly dry that paint, but it'll adhere it. But what it does is it leaves this really nice texture. You can go back and add to it, touch it up, but it really looks, especially with pipe or metal, it just gives that extra, sort of years that how rust builds and builds. Okay. So I'm going to take this good old just black, cheap Home Depot paint. So this is messy, right? Wearing my gloves that I don't care about. And I'm not going to worry about getting inside. I'm going to get inside the boat pretty good, but I'm not really worried about the deck of the boat, because of course it's going to have a wood deck inside. So it doesn't take long. Real quick. All right. So now I have this glass black, really wet, messy little boat. I'm going to tip this off to the side a little bit. And literally I'm just going to coat this thing with this rust everywhere, right? And it's going to get a little messy. It's a little sketchy. You're like, oh God, is this going to come out okay? First couple times I did it, I was like, is this going to work? It's just a piece of resin, big deal. But the results come out really good. And it's easy to touch up. If you don't like something, then I just use a brush. I just go back and I just really work it a little bit. Not any more challenging than that. You don't want to work it with a brush too much. And the reason is that it will, it can obviously get down to the resin itself. So it seems a little messy, and it is, but it works really well. So again, what's happening here is that it's really just bonding with that paint that's there, right? Literally just go through, tip it around. Now, I'm gonna have to go back and do a little touch up. That's pretty normal. And then I'll go back once this dries really well. I'll let it sit a bit, and I'll use a really soft brush on this. What you get is you get this really cool texture of rust everywhere, right? And you get a lot of variation. And you go back and you do a little touch up, once this really sets well, because it does, it's got to cure a little bit because, the paint underneath's got to cure. You go back, touch it up with some chalks and maybe highlight a little bit. But what you get is you get a shockingly realistic rust, and then you still can get that, the black paint below it or underneath, a little variation, but really easy method. And it looks like shockingly real without having to, go through, overthinking it or trying to, make it perfect. It's really hard, we're used to painting things, but it's really hard to make things look random, right? Without a lot of work. So that's where we're going to sit today. The other pieces, again, I start off with the resin, prime it. I usually hit it with a little bit of just Silverwood or India ink to highlight it real quickly before I even go through and do the painting process. And what I'm looking for is if there's any flaws or any cleanup that I need to do. If I missed it, the yellow resin is really hard to see the detailing with, and even in good light. But once you add a primer, all that detail will stand out. It'll also show you if you've got a little bit of flash to clean up or anything else. So it's a really easy way to really kind of take a step, and then you can clean it up a little more and then hit it with a touch of primer and keep going. So this is just the simple wood deck. This is resin. It's been painted with that tan camouflage, and it's just been lightly streaked with a little bit of Silverwood. Now that gives it that aged gray look. And what I'll do next is I'll go back and I'll hit some burnt umber washes on some random boards. I'll do a little raw sienna. I won't paint it on. I'll do a little bit of washes. So I just put a little bit of color to get some variation. And then I'll hit it with some more alcohol and India ink. And then I'll go back and dry brush it. And resin is a great material to really replicate wood, resin, metal, kind of through process-based stuff. So this deck, it's going to drop in here inside the boat. That gray contrast with the rusty boat, it looks pretty cool. All right, that's all I have for today. Any